Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Sometimes the best move for your career is to move. But when is moving really a good option for you? Tonight we have Jessica Morehouse of morehouse.com. Welcome to our show, Jessica.
Thank you. Sorry, it's jessicamorehouse.com.
Jessica Morehouse. Oh, I apologize.
But now I have to buy that domain, so it's okay. I'll just go buy it right now.
Yeah. We try to hammer out all these details beforehand, but this is how we roll. And I'm just going to write that down so I have it here. Thank you, Jessica, and I apologize for that.
That's okay.
The rest of the Money Mastermind Show here, we have Kyle Prevo of youngandthrifty.ca, Miranda Marquit of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, and Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog. I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke. So, Jessica, moving for your career, when does it actually make sense to move for your career? Like for me, I'm not one that likes to even change jobs. So to change cities, to change jobs, that's kind of a scary thing.
Oh yeah, and it is scary. It's a huge risk. I mean, for my experience, it seemed like the right time just because I wasn't necessarily happy in my career and where I was living. In Vancouver, there wasn't exactly, there just weren't that many opportunities there. And same with my husband. He was a freelancer in the music industry, and it's, there's not a huge pool of talent and work in Vancouver. And so I guess we've been in Toronto for about 2.5 years. So I guess about a year before our wedding, we kind of decided, hey, I think we should really think about moving for, to really jumpstart our careers. Nothing's really happening here. We just felt like we're just kind of coasting. We weren't really kind of rising up. And we had a lot of people from Vancouver start to move to Toronto. They're like, you've got to come here. There's a lot of stuff happening. And so we took a huge leap. We didn't move because we had jobs there. We quit our jobs and then moved there and hoped for the best. And so far, so good. We're still there. We have jobs, so it worked out. But I think there may not necessarily be a good time. I think you have to just kind of figure out what makes sense for you.
How do you know, though, like you said, you just kind of quit your jobs and moved. How do you know that the market is going to be available for you and that you're going to be able to afford things? I mean, Toronto is comparable to where I'm right outside New York City, where, it is pretty expensive. Like, how do you know that you're going to be prepared for that?
Yeah, we definitely did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people that we knew that lived there, met with people that were from Toronto that moved to Vancouver and kind of figured out what the differences were. But as far as like cost of living, everything's pretty much the same. If anything, things are a little bit cheaper in Toronto, but you get paid more. The salaries are a lot higher, and there's just a lot more opportunities for jobs. Whereas, when I was looking for jobs in Vancouver, I mean, you'd be on the boards and you just kind of see the same jobs every day. Whereas in Toronto, it is hard to keep up. So, I think, we definitely did our research and talked to a lot of people before kind of taking that leap. And I'm really glad we did, because before actually deciding on, let's definitely move to Toronto, we were thinking of moving to Montreal. And then we talked to a lot of people, did our research, and found out it just would not have been a good situation for us. Also, Josh doesn't speak French.
I feel like there's going to be some kind of like, inter-country war here now.
So now you said that you didn't have a job when you moved there, but did you have some other financial arrangements? Like, did you have some sort of financial safety net that you could draw on when you moved so that you would be able to take the time to look for a job or be able to manage? Because like you said, it's a huge risk to just up and move. And I just recently completed my second cross-country move in the space of a year. And it's not easy to get the money to just pack up and leave. Not everybody could just pack up and leave. So what sort of financial things did you have in place so that you could go ahead and do this?
Sure. We definitely had been saving for quite a bit of time. And actually before that, I think we were saving more for a down payment on a place. But then we also kind of realized, we can't really afford in Vancouver. We're going to have to save for a lot longer to afford in that city. So, we had our emergency funds, and then we also had this pool of money that we're kind of saving for something. And so we kind of used that as like, okay, well, worst comes to worst. If we don't find work within a couple months, then we're going to have to go to this kind of like third emergency fund. But we definitely saved up enough cash to hold us over for several months. And Josh is my husband. He's a freelancer, and so he actually could do some work just online. And for me, I, have my blog, and so I did a few, and I'm a freelance writer as well, and so I did a few side gigs on at the time too. So that kind of helped it out. But still, I mean, we were pretty lucky. Josh, I mean, he really did have to start from the ground zero because didn't know anyone in the city at all, no family, no friends. And so, because his business is all about knowing people and networking, he just had to hustle and just get out there, go to all these networking events, spread the word. And I'd say within 6 months, he kind of built up a bit of a client base. And for me, I think I found work within about 3 months, and worked one job, didn't really work out, and then eventually found a job for, I think for 6 or 7 months I was there, and then eventually found the job that I was really, hoping to get, kind of the dream job. And then I found that, and I've been there ever since. So we definitely had a lot of cash, just in case. But we also gave us a time limit. If the, things just were not working in our favor, we'd be, like, all right, fine, we have to move back. And we're also lucky we didn't own property, so we didn't have that to deal with.
So it sounded like you had a hefty plan going into it, at least.
Oh, for sure. We definitely planned it out and made sure we kind of had everything in order. We didn't want to just all right, let's see what happens.
Like the acting story you might hear, or modeling. I'm just going to go there and arrive, and somehow I'm just going to be discovered, and then everything will be set.
Yeah, it's like, no. It's like, if things don't work out, we're going to freeze to death in the Toronto cold winter. So better have something planned.
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah, and I like, too, that you put kind of a limit on it and said, hey, if it doesn't work out in this set amount of time, then we'll have to revisit. You weren't so, I guess, married to the idea that you were it was do or die.
Exactly, yeah. And I think because the first year is really hard moving someplace, especially when you don't know anybody and you're starting a new job, you're creating a whole new social network. I mean, it was tough that first year, and I'm like, I don't know if I could do that again. It was really tough. But throughout that time, we definitely evaluated, like, on a month-to-month basis, like, how are we doing? Do we still like it here? Do we still want to kind of give it our all? And I definitely suggest, if you're moving someplace, for to jumpstart your career or just for another reason, give it a year, go through all the seasons, and then you'll kind of have a better understanding whether, like, that's the place to be, or no, I should move somewhere else or move back home.
I think that really is something that's underrated when people are thinking about moving for an increase in salary or something. Is they see this dollar figure that's, I'm going to be making $20,000 or $30,000 more, but then they don't take the time to sit back and consider all these other factors that are going to be a part of it. Making new friends, finding a new church at your new location, figuring out where you're going to be living, property tax rates, or just goes on and on and on. There's so many other things that go into making a huge move like this that you really do need to think about before you jump in.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think we underestimated was the cost of actually physically moving. Like, we were pretty lucky. We just lived in a tiny apartment in Vancouver. Most of the furniture we had was, like, given to us, or it was, from Craigslist. So we sold most of it just because none of it really had that much value anyway. And then we just packed up most of our belongings in our tiny car and drove from Vancouver to Toronto. But then when we got there, we're like, oh, great, it didn't really cost us that much to actually physically move there. But setting up a new place and getting all new furniture and everything, that was a bit like, oh, crap, I didn't realize how much stuff we had and how much stuff we need. So, yeah, definitely something to consider. Oh, yeah, we went to IKEA a lot. There's also a Winners and a Marshalls, like, walking distance from my place, so I went there pretty much every weekend just to see what was going on there.
Nice. So one thing, though, along with what Peter was talking about when you're getting really into the dollar signs, one thing to remember, too, is when you're thinking of cost of living and putting that into the dollar signs, because I recently moved from the Philadelphia area, and I cut back on how much I make when I moved here. So I am actually to the point where I'm actually making less than I made in Philadelphia, but I live in a place with such a different cost of living that I have more discretionary income. Yeah. So that's something to think about too when you're moving, because just because you have a higher dollar amount doesn't mean you're going to actually have more discretionary income. Because my lifestyle has taken a notch up since I've moved, and I am doing less work and making less money.
Yeah, I think for us, because the cost of living is pretty, like everything costs about the same in Vancouver, Toronto, but we instantly started making more. It was like, wow, it's way freaking better here because we're making way less there, but things are way more expensive. It was kind of crazy. But yeah, exactly. It's like, or you can move someplace that's less, way cheaper. You might make less, but you might actually be able to save more. So that might be, it's not about, making a higher income necessarily, but yeah, definitely like the quality of life is better for us when we moved.
Yeah, to illustrate that, on CNN Money, I read something today. It said that a $50,000 salary in central Pennsylvania, maybe that's where you were at, Miranda, $50,000 in central Pennsylvania would need to increase to a whopping $84,000 in Brooklyn in order to just maintain the same quality of life.
Wow.
Which seemed kind of crazy to me, but
yeah.
Or like $5,800 in Idaho, or
is $50,000 a lot there? Doesn't sound like a lot.
Well, and that's the thing, is you can use those cost of living calculators to kind of at least get an idea of what you're getting into. Because if you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get a $20,000 raise, but your example, Peter, is that's a $34,000 difference. So your $20,000 raise is actually like taking a pay cut.
Exactly.
When you moved,
I commend you on sort of making that big jump and doing it for your career and just realizing the reality sort of what's going on, because it's very frustrating for me to hear young people complain and then be like, oh, there's all these opportunities right across Canada. For a lot of years, they were in Alberta, maybe not as much anymore. So sorry, Tom. I don't mean to hit below the belt there. But a lot of people where there was opportunities, they'd look at me like I'm crazy. You want me to move? Yeah, I want you to move to where the jobs are. That's how this whole capitalism thing's supposed to work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of the rest of you guys have noticed this, but
well, speaking of Alberta, actually, the fact the economy is dropping a little is one of the perks of my coming move. In the spring, I'll be moving down to Calgary, and the real estate's dropped about 8%, I think it is right now, over the previous year. So that's one of the benefits I'm going to see of moving. And otherwise, most of the other costs already were the same. Real estate was the only thing that was higher, and now they're a lot more equal already. So plus, I'll continue in my career, so I won't be without a job. So it's a safe play. But the real estate coming down was what was a nice perk of moving in the spring.
For sure.
Well, I think Tom too, like one of the great things that Tom can speak to is what happens when your company actually, encourages you to move and pays for your move. That helps.
Yeah, they're paying for everything, so it wasn't too difficult of a decision once I decided I was willing to keep working.
That was the tough decision, right?
Yeah, it really was. But
Right.
In my case, the company's going to be paying for everything related to the move and a little bit of perks around that too. So it was a pretty easy decision to go somewhere that's going to cost the same amount of money, but I'm not paying for that move, and we're actually looking to be in a small town outside of Calgary. So we're trying to improve our lifestyle, because with our kids, we just want to be in a smaller town and get a bigger house at the same time, because we're getting a little cramped. So there was lots of benefits to moving beyond just the career itself, but the career is the reason we were able to make the move.
Nice.
I really like how you talk about lifestyle and everything too, because a lot of the time it's not just about your career, but your overall lifestyle.
Yeah. For us, I found just because we made less, but it was pretty expensive in Vancouver, we didn't go out and didn't do as much. Whereas in Toronto, we definitely have more money to play with and go out to eat more and, can actually go on vacations and weekend trips. Whereas, in Vancouver, it's like, let's just stay home again.
I find it interesting that that you're actually making more and that the cost of living is pretty much the same.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of, it's a weird thing. I'm, now that I've kind of realized that I've been in the city for so long and I really like Toronto, there's just, amazing people and amazing things to do and lots of opportunities. I'm kind of like, why isn't everyone here? This is great. And I actually do feel like lots of people that I know from Vancouver are slowly making the move, depending on what industry they're working, especially for, if you work in the arts and entertainment industry. Sorry.
Some of the people that are going to move in.
Yeah, I know. Hold on. I know this is live. It's my grandpa. Sorry, he's calling. I think they got it.
He wants to be on the show. Yeah.
He wants to be on the show. I'm so sorry. Sorry, what were you saying?
First time caller, long time listener.
Grandpa.
You were talking about industries and arts. We had gotten
Right,
to
yeah.
arts.
So kind of depending on, what industry you work on, I find definitely if you work in the arts and entertainment industry, Toronto is such a better place to work in than Vancouver. And I find lots of people, because I went to film school, so lots of the people that I went to school with are slowly making the trek out here because, there's just a lot more stuff going on. But
Now, if they all move there, though, then the job's going to dry up, and then the whole economy
no.
changes.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's, the city is continuously growing. There's more, companies coming here. All the headquarters are here. Lots of startups are happening here. Whereas I find lots of, Vancouver used to be kind of known as the startup center, but I feel like, Toronto's kind of ramping it up. But we'll see.
When you move,
that maybe is something to consider too when you're thinking about moving for a job. Is whether, what's the environment like in the place you're moving to? Are there a lot of companies that are doing pretty well in that area, or is that one company that you're going to be working for, maybe they're doing okay, but there aren't a lot of other companies that are? So what if your job doesn't work out? Are you going to be able to find another job if that doesn't work out?
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm lucky that because, there's a pretty good pool of jobs here. If for some reason I lose my job or decide to leave for something else, it won't be that hard. Whereas I found in Vancouver, I was working for one job for 3 years, and around that kind of 2-year mark, I was actually starting to look for something else, and I could not find anything. There just was, and then you just kind of dry up. And also just, I was working for a media company at the time. I knew a lot of people in town, and so when I applied to jobs, because it's a very small town, it's like, oh crap, I don't want them to know that I might be looking for another thing. They may tell my boss. Toronto's pretty big. You can be pretty anonymous there, which is nice.
how did you know that it was the location and not the general economy that made finding a job hard?
Yeah. And it could be a couple things, but I guess, yeah, it's just like, we talked to a lot of people that moved there, or lots of people that were from Toronto that were moving to Vancouver. They moved to Vancouver because they wanted a more relaxed lifestyle. And when we talked to them, we were like, what's kind of the job market and, the economy in Toronto? And they're like, oh, it's great. I mean, you won't have trouble finding a job. And I felt really bad being like, you may have trouble here. You'll, have no problem finding a yoga studio, but you may have trouble finding a job. So I found like, yeah, lots of people were starting to move over there because of, jobs specifically. No one really moved. I mean, I could just be me. I don't think I would move to Toronto because it's, such a beautiful place to live. Well, I mean, beautiful BC. I mean, Vancouver's gorgeous. Whenever I come back home, like, oh my gosh, there's like mountains, there's the ocean, this is gorgeous. But Toronto is kind of the place to be, I think, when, in terms of jumpstarting your career.
Was commuting an issue for you? Or a factor in any way?
Not really. I feel like actually our commute is way better in Toronto because just the setup's a bit better. It's more of a grid, whereas Vancouver is a bit more, it's a tiny little island. There's not a lot of room, and it's really expensive. And, I was lucky when we lived in Vancouver, actually, I was able to walk to work. But I knew if I wanted to find another job, that probably wouldn't be the case. And so I'd have to, have kind of a long transit. And the transit system is big compared to Toronto. Whereas Toronto, we live technically downtown, though it's quite a bit west of the core. And yeah, we're right near the subway line. We're, and there's so many different, there's the subway, there's streetcar, there's a bunch of buses, there's a bunch of options. So I actually find like it's actually way easier to get around, and our commutes are tiny. And actually Josh was able to, before he really did require a car for his job in Vancouver, whereas here he was able to, because there's just a lot of, there's more opportunities to bike or take transit. He was actually able to take his car off the road and save several $1,000s a year, which is kind of nice.
So for you, it was just you and your husband?
Yeah.
No kids. And what about the rest of your family? Do they live in one town or the other, or? Yeah,
they all pretty much live in a suburb called Coquitlam outside of Vancouver. So everyone's still on the West Coast, yeah.
So you made the choice to leave all that behind.
Yeah. So it was tough. I'm really, we're both very close with our family, so that was a big tough decision. But we may not necessarily be here forever. And I definitely feel like if we want to start a family, we may look back into moving back if it makes sense. And that's, a tough decision. It's like, what if we want to start a family but our careers are really great in Toronto and, nothing's really improved in Vancouver. What do we do? So lots of things to consider.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like if you're going to make a move like that, especially when it's so far away, you really have to have everybody on board at the same time and like really into what you're doing there.
Exactly. And it was kind of, ideal situation that Josh really, was on the same wavelength as me. He's like, I'm at the same point in his career. It wasn't really progressing like he wanted. And, we're like approaching 30 and we really kind of had an idea of where we wanted to be at that point. So we're like, might as well do it now. If we don't do it now, we may not do it.
Yeah. Well, I think, though, too, it's a good point when you start having kids and to think about that. I mean, the big reason I moved back here to Idaho was to have the people nearby, because I ended up moving back to family. But part of my complication, of course, was the divorce, and so but I'm lucky because my ex is fine with me moving. That's not always the case. You may not, if you have an ex, you may not be able to up and move your kids across the country if your ex isn't on board with it. So that's something to think about as well.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Your family situation in general is going to probably be a huge factor. If you have kids, it's a school district that you're going to, getting to the school. Are they going to have friends and what type of environment they're in? When you don't have kids, you could probably live in the city, run around, it's no big deal. But once you have the kids, you might not want that type of speed also.
Yeah.
It's a whole different.
It's a whole different scenario. Yeah, like for us, we really didn't have anything to lose, like we had our kind of emergency funds, we had our plan, and we're like, if it doesn't work out, we can move back, no big deal. But if we had kids, that definitely would have made it a lot, you have to, make roots somewhere, and that'd be hard, moving after a year or something if it didn't work out.
We considered that having kids, but our oldest kid's in grade 1, so we figured right now it's not exactly a time where it's gonna matter too much. if we were bouncing around different cities later on, it would probably disturb them a little more, but I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, it's certainly been a consideration for us too. You don't want to, once they finally take root and they make these friendships, you don't want to pull it all apart and then what effect that has, because that could be traumatic for a kid.
Exactly.
So this sounds like it's actually worked out pretty well for you, Jessica.
Yes, it's a success story. Yay!
Thank goodness.
It's going good.
For all of our listeners out there, like what should they consider? Like what do you think is a quick checklist for them if they're considering moving for their careers?
Sure. I'd say definitely look into what industry you want to work in or what kind of job you want. For me, I knew before I used to work in like advertising sales. I knew I wanted to work more in marketing, specifically digital marketing, and I knew that there were a lot more opportunities in Toronto specifically, just because that's where all kind of the big companies were, and so they were all starting to hire those positions. Whereas in Vancouver, they're a bit slower to adopt. So because of that, I'm like, okay, this makes more sense for me. So that's definitely one thing to consider. If you shouldn't definitely just like go on a map like, I want to live in California. I would love to live in California, but it may not make sense for or Hawaii. I always say that. I'm like, if I were American, I don't know why everyone's not living in Hawaii. That looks like the best place to live.
Because it's expensive.
Yeah.
Hawaii and Vancouver look cheap.
Yeah.
My sister lived in Hawaii for a while.
Yeah.
She ended up living in a tent on the beach for a little while because she couldn't afford housing.
It still sounds nice. I don't know.
That actually doesn't sound bad either in Hawaii. It's better than a box in New York City.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. I guess other things to consider that we definitely didn't really even think about was, what is the weather like on, where you're thinking of going? I mean, we're from Vancouver. It just rains. But otherwise it's pretty warm all the time. You never have to own a proper winter jacket. And then when we moved to Toronto, of course, just our luck, it was like one of the record-breaking hottest summers and record-breaking coldest winters. It's like the polar vortex winter that happened a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was the worst.
So
And
still
we
relatively
didn't-
moderate then.
Prairie boy.
Exactly. I was dying. I was just inside for like 8 months. I'm like, I'm not going outside.
Some of us aren't used to your Arctic average weather there, Kyle.
Polar
I just-
vortex isn't an every year thing. I thought that was.
I just remember like Kyle be like, "Hey, it's colder here than it is on Mars."
That was the headline. Yeah.
So Jessica, excuse me. Thank you so much for sharing this. It really is great to hear that you were able to find a new town, and it was a major city that you moved to, and it actually worked out better for you. And I think there's a lot of valuable lessons in your move for our listeners. We like to wrap up with a final word. We go around our panel. So Tom, if you could start us off on a final word on whether moving makes sense for your career.
Well, yeah, I think like we've talked about, you got to look at it beyond just your career, though, too. Certainly career, family, cost of living. You got to just kind of weigh all of that and sort of see where that lands you, if it's worth making that move, or you're better off where you are.
And Peter, what's your final word?
Moving through your career, it's more than just the dollar numbers with the salary. You have to consider everything when it comes to your family, the cost of living in the place you may be moving, to the weather and everything else, whether you will fit in with the culture of the area you're moving to. So make sure you're not just having stars in your eyes with the high dollar figures that you might make. There's a lot more you need to consider.
Good points. Miranda, your final words?
Yeah, don't forget to think about how much it's going to cost to get you there and get set up, as Jessica mentioned a little bit earlier, and as I have learned through, like I said, 2 moves in a space of 12 months. So you really do want to make sure that you understand what it's going to cost to get you to where you're going, as well as set you up once you are there.
And Kyle, what's your final word?
Especially if you're a young person and maybe don't have quite as many considerations, don't be afraid to move. Nobody owes you a job within 7 square blocks of where you grew up. And I think sometimes I need to channel that inner old man, get off my lawn, go find someone else's lawn to work on because there's no jobs here. So anyway, think about that, and don't be afraid to leap when you're young and can take the risks.
And Jessica, if you'll close out our final word.
Sure. Definitely kind of like what Kyle said, don't be afraid to take risks that may be the best thing you ever do. It was one of the scariest things, but one of the best things I ever did, moving from, the city that I grew up in to a city where I didn't know a person. So try it out.
It's a great
and you're
story,
not a
Jessica.
failure if it doesn't work out. It's okay.
Jessica, for those that are out there, can you tell our viewers a little bit about your site and what you do?
Sure. So, my site is jessicamorehouse.com. I've been blogging for about 4 years about personal finance, and I also have a podcast myself called the Mo Money Podcast, where I interview people with interesting money stories. I've been doing that since June, so check it out.
All right, so definitely check out the site, jessicamorehouse.com, as well as the podcast, Mo Money. Get on that. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening and watching. And until next week, be good with your money.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.